Alright, let's try and go forward in the mimers. Here we are, page 22. Shaul,
Yeah.
you want to make a double while you're out there?
Yeah.
That's a good man. So it says like this. Page 22, this is the last paragraph on the page. V'hini lahavin zeh ba'avoda. Okay, again, last point, just to do a quick recap of what we said last time. So, actually, someone tell me, how is Lech Lecha an Indian from Lamayla Lamata and Lamata Lamayla? Who can explain that? Anybody?
There's this sort of relationship with Chokhmah and binah,
Mm-hmm.
whereas the Chokhmah is this infinite, unexpressible mass or sort of aspect of God, and the binah is this light that comes down. There's a going down in that, but then also a return back up, because everything is in everything.
Yeah, so there's the going down there. Why do we go up? What's the mechanism by which we go up suddenly for that?
Because Ati only dwells in Bina.
We go get Adik. We go to get Adik to bring it down to binah, to express itself in a higher level. That's the mother.
Wait, so yes, so in short, what we're saying is that basically to go down to binah, which is a contraction, is harder and more complex of a task than staying in the chokhmah. And therefore, in order to do it, you actually have to go up to get a higher level than you're standing on, in order to bring it down to that lower level of binah. Yeah, so that's basically, so actually what it comes down to is Lamayla, Lamata, and Lamata, Lamayla happen at the exact same time. The second you go down, you're actually going up in order to get there. It's like one step. Every direction down is a step up in the exact same time. It's the only way to go down. And that's what we said is all symbolized, emblemized by the Yud itself. The Yud basically itself has three parts to it. So the fact is, it's really just a centerpiece, but when it goes up, it goes down. It has like a crown on top and then automatically a crown on the bottom. Yeah? Okay, so now let's understand this ba'avoda, he says. Lahavin ze ba'avoda. How does this relate to us, more or less? Hine amru novlos chokhmah shel mayla Torah. So this means, novlos means basically like foliage that falls off a tree. Foliage. You know that word?
No.
Crusty leaves.
Yeah, like leaves that fall off a tree. Even crusty leaves, one might say. Like fall. So novlos chokhmah means like the crusty leaves that fall off of chokhmah. Shelmaila Torah, and we're saying what that really is. What are those crusty leaves? The novlos, the drippings of chokhmah. That's what we call Torah. What we call Torah is really the crusty leaves that drip off of chokhmah.
What's novlos again?
Novlos means these foliage, this falling. So whoever chokhmah is, we learned something similar to this recently when we said that there's nar yotzi me'eden lashkosas agan. A river comes out of Eden to water the garden. What does the garden represent?
No, Keter.
Garden represent.
Well, man, it's a strikeout. Next batter.
No, I'm not up.
Okay, what does Eden represent? What does Eden represent? It makes me nervous a little bit. No, because like we talked about this, it's not like it kind of goes in one ear out the other a little bit. It's my fault for sure. I'm just saying, like, how do we got to bring it down a little bit. We had a whole conversation one time about the Eden, the river that comes out of Eden, and the garden that's a result of that. Because that's a verse in the beginning of the Torah. You may remember it says a river comes out of Eden to water the garden. The garden is called Gan Eden. The Eden is one place, the garden is another place. They're connected by a stream of water. Any of this sound familiar? Yeah? So let me put it like this. We said, what's the gematria of the word Gan?
The river is binah.
Thank you. Yes, the river is binah. Good. All right, you're the next batter. The river is binah. So what's on top and what's on bottom?
is Eden.
Chochma is Eden.
And Malchus is the other one.
Malchus is Gan. Very good.
Yeah.
Okay, and Gan. Yeah, that was a grand slam. Suddenly, huh? You just like turned that around. How'd you do that?
The river is the key.
Yeah, the river is the key. So what is the gematria of Gan?
3 and 650.
What is it? Gan.
53.
53. What is 53 significant here?
33 parshas.
53 parshas of the Torah.
Oh,
Okay, so what are we saying? Now we also said something else. Remember, we learned together, I believe we learned together, yes, that there's an Indian of the Eitz Besoch Hagan. The Eitz Chaim Besoch Hagan. We learned the mimer together that talked about the Eitz Chaim in the middle of the garden. Do you remember this? It was regarding the Indian of, it was like kind of like we threw it in there. It was a British, yeah, we're learning about. Anyway, so what was the idea is that the Eitz Chaim represents the Kabbalah. Right, of course, Eitz Chaim. But Besoch Hagan, what's the Gan? The Gan is the 53 parshas of the Torah. But so you have the Eitz Chaim sort of as it is, in its place, let's say in Chochmah. Then you have the Eitz Chaim Besoch Hagan, which means it kind of goes down a level in order to associate itself with the 53 parshas. Why? Because the 53 parshas are already delineated into time. Why do you need 53 parshas? Because you have 53 weeks, 52 weeks, right? That corresponds to the weeks. So the fact that the Torah is read week by week is already an aspect of Torah which has descended into time. So Malchus, which is anyway creates time and space, when the Torah goes down there, it's called Novlos Chochma, Shelmaila Torah. Right? In other words, or maybe I gave the wrong emphasis on that Shelmaila there, but Novlos Chochma Shelmaila, in other words, the drippings of Chochma Shelmaila, right? Of the higher Chochma, which is like, let's say, where the Eitz Hagan is, when it's not enclosed into, the Eitz Chaim is when it's not enclosed into the Gan, that becomes Torah when it does enclose itself down. So, you understand what I'm saying? Novlos Chochma Shalmaila, the drippings of Eden, basically, of Chochma Shalmaila, is what we wind up calling Torah. So this, that we call Torah, we're pretty much big fans of it. What we're really saying is that what is the Torah? It's just the crumpled leaves that fall off of the thing called Chochma, basically. Got it? Okay.
So that was Gan. What was Eden again?
Eden is Chochma itself.
So it's Gan.
Gan is Malchus,
Oh.
where the Torah descends when it becomes the drippings. Okay, so where do we see it? Shatorah shehi b'devarim gashmi, hi mechilas chakim v'lo b'chachmi yediyah. So basically, Torah, which goes into physicality, the Torah speaks about, or comes into the physical world and it speaks about physicality. Hi mechilas chakim v'lo b'chachmi yediyah. We're going to say for a second that it holds this place called Chakim, wise with an unknowable wisdom. Ki hine Chochma Elyona ein la hasaga. Because the higher Chochma cannot be grasped. Rak davka bislav shusa b'dvarim gashmim, only when it invests itself into physicality. Shazai v'lechikas ha'esrog. Then when you take the esrog al derek mashal, by way of analogy, since the Chochma has been invested into it, it's as if you're holding on to now the Chochma ha'elyona, the higher Chochma. This is going together with what we said yesterday, basically, regarding the mashal. Not only yesterday, but the whole mimer. He's sort of like, he said, how does this all apply to avoda? Like, how can I apply this to my actual life? And he's doing it. He's saying that, what do we say about the mashal? And we just reiterated it in the beginning of class, that when you go lower, you're going higher to get there. What does it look like when you go lower? So we said an analogy of a wise person who wants to explain something to a younger person or a child. And he has to dress it up in physical things. He has to give what's called a mashal. So instead of talking about the Orein Sov, he starts talking about a rock and a stick. Right? So that's called dressing something up in a mashal. So the thing is, you can't grab onto, as Aleph said, you can't grab onto the Chochma Elyona because it's just ingraspable. It's like an infinite, unexpressible realm that is impossible to grasp. But when it dresses itself up in a mashal, it decides to basically enclose itself in something which is graspable, then you can hold on to it. In this particular capacity, it's not like you explaining something to a child where you give a mashal about a rock and a stick. In this capacity, Hashem actually creates the mitzvah of taking the esrog and the lulav. That's how he encloses his chokhmah shel maila, so we can literally hold on to it. It becomes graspable because he put it into finite objects. We hold on to it. It's as if we're holding on to the chokhmah elyona, because he put it into a mashal. He gave it a handle. What is this handle? It's the biggest magical mystery thing of all. Why dafka lulav and esrog? Specifically, he takes that as his analogy. I find that to be quite fitting because it just makes no sense whatsoever, right? Like you're going to shake these. Yeah, like you're just shaking, plants in the air. Like what kind of a mitzvah is this? There's no seemingly reason to do this. Grown men, what are you doing? So, what he's saying is that it doesn't necessarily make sense that Hashem can put an infinite wisdom inside of some kind of a finite body. But that's exactly what the Torah mitzvahs are. It's the perfect. Remember we said yesterday, at a certain point in time, people who could give mashalim, that era passed. Because to be so wise as to take something that no one would understand and not only explain it to them, but find the exact little box that fits the concept perfectly, it takes going up into the Keter in order to find that. So this is what it means in Avodas Hashem. You have to realize that when you are doing a mitzvah, he's basically trying to excite you a little bit. When you are doing a mitzvah, it's Hashem's little way of enabling you to hold on to his infinite chokhmah, which is itself an impossibility. But that's exactly what you're doing when you take the mashal. You become sort of part of the mashal when you do the mitzvah. You follow that, Eli? V'hinei hamshachas chokhmah elyona b'dvarim gashmim. Yes, so the page 22, the second paragraph down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 lines, 6 lines. 5 lines, the end of the 5th line. V'hinei hamshachas. Hinei hamshachas chokhmah elyona b'dvarim gashmim. This idea of bringing the higher wisdom and putting it somehow into physical objects, hu al yedei or ha-keser, right? We know, how do you go down? By going up. You go to the or ha-keser. Ki oraisa mechokhmah nafkis, because it's true that oraisa, which means Torah, comes out from chokhmah, right? In other words, what do we say? We say that the chokhmah, the Torah is novlos chokhmah shel maila. We're still calling the Torah a davar chokhmah, right? Because we're saying it's the crumpled leaves that fall off of the real chokhmah, but it's still called chokhmah. It's a product of chokhmah. However, that's b'bechinas giloy. That's because chokhmah is, so to speak, its revealed source. It comes out of chokhmah. Like if you try and find out where this thing comes from, you'll find chokhmah at the top. Aval makura, but the real source of it, beyond its revealed source, hu lamaila. It's really above chokhmah. Because how does it get down to the crumpled leaf, so to speak? How does it even get down here? It's because chokhmah went beyond itself up into Keter in order to produce that foliage, right? Let's say novos can also be like the apples that fall off a tree, but it doesn't have to be such a. It's the product of the tree, kind of. It's not the tree itself.
The fruit.
It could be the fruit. It is like sort of like the leaves. Also, the leaves is part of the fruit. The leaves come and they blossom and they grow and they make fruits, right? What's that?
Leaves are made from the minerals that are in the soil. The roots pull up into the tree.
Right, exactly. So that's the point. When you look at the leaf, a normal person in a revealed sense, you don't see what's underground. You see this beautiful tree producing leaves. So you think that the tree is the source of the leaves. But if you know a little bit, you know that it's not the tree. It's the roots that are the source of the leaves. And as deeper the roots go, the more the leaves will go. In other words, the branches will go. It's the tree is basically pretty much bang on a perfect analogy for this thing, right? Because it mamas grows simultaneously in two opposite directions, and the greater it goes down, obviously that's the source of life, the greater it can go up. Only it's flipped.
Can we break down this mushroom, the tree? One more time, just to be clear that
Yeah, the tree becomes a mashal, right? This is the point. Like we couldn't understand this whole thing, and then it's like, just look at a tree. That's exactly what it does to you. It's somehow. So he says, what, again the same thing? So he says basically you have 3 levels. Keter, Chokhmah, binah. In order to go down to binah, you must go up to Keter. How is that and nonetheless, let me finish the model. Nonetheless, when you get to the binah, it looks as though chokhmah is your source.
Right.
But in reality, Keter is the source. As we just got through saying twice this morning, that Atik resides in binah dafka, right? There's a connection between the higher part of the yud and the lower part of the yud. So what's the tree? The tree is like exactly that. The trunk of the tree is chokhmah. The growth on the top of that, the novlos, is whatever, this foliage.
He uses the word?
He used the word novlos. Novlos chokhmah shel maila Torah. It means, it took me a few years to figure out how to read that sentence, but novlos shel, what is it? Now I gotta look at it again. Novlos chokhmah shel maila, so the foliage of chokhmah shel maila, of the higher chokhmah, is Torah. So what we call Torah is really the foliage of the higher chokhmah.
So it's not even the trunk.
Anyway, no, it's not the trunk. Dafka. Chokhmah is the trunk. Chokhmah is the trunk is the higher chokhmah that we're talking about.
Right.
The foliage, however, is not a product of the trunk. It only looks like it's a product of the trunk. It's really a product of the roots, which is Keter.
This is part of the trunk.
It's an extension of the trunk. It's binah. It's binah. So yes, it is. It's the branches, right? Which is like the river, kind of, right? It's like they go off the mainstream, the ocean. It's also called Yam Shel Chokhmah. You can also call this. Let's use another. Did you get that, by the way, Eli? The analogy.
So the roots are binah?
The roots are Keter.
Okay, yeah.
It's similar
I thought
to.
You just said they're binah right now.
No. So another analogy you could take is mamish with water. You could say that it's called Yam Shel Chokhmah, right? Is that the sea is called the Yam, and then what comes off the sea? The river, right? But really, there's something that feeds the sea. The sea looks like the source of all water, but there's something called the Tahom. There's the abyss, which according to Kabbalah, and I think even science, it actually feeds the oceans.
Not yet science.
Not yet science. I think there are some days like that in
From
science.
down there?
Mm-hmm.
What?
Yeah, there's like infinite water under the earth, like it's called the Tahom. I don't think it refers to the ocean. It refers to some under the ocean situation.
Whoa.
Yeah. So it's the same idea.
And that's
Look
how
at tons.
springs,
What's that?
that's how springs are, according to Kabbalah, are formed. Ma'anot is water from the ocean that makes it through that abyss and then comes out.
Oh, from the ocean through the abyss. I was thinking the other way around. Okay, we're a little confused here, but that's all right. Forget the water. Let's go with the tree.
So Keter is the roots that feeds the trunk, that makes the leaves through the trunk.
Yeah. And that's why do we say through the trunk? Because this is the line we're on right now. He says, because there's a line which says that Oraisa me chokhma nafkis, right? Nafkas. There's Oraisa means Torah, me chokhma, from chokhma, nafkas comes out.
What are the branches?
No, so just, yeah. Yes, the branches basically, which we said is like Oraisa, Torah. Yes, we said that.
There's the foliage as well.
The foliage is Torah.
So where's the binah in all this?
The binah is, in this case, Torah, right? Because we're saying Oraisa me chokhma. Oraisa means Torah, right? From chokhma comes out, which means that means the Oraisa is actually in this case representing binah, right? And it comes out from chokhma, was what we're saying. The source of the Torah is chokhma. That's what we've been saying the whole time. That when chokhma sort of gives off its foliage, it becomes the Torah, right? Ellie, did you ever get those pens? I'm counting on you to get those markers, yeah? And I'll pay you back.
All right.
Yeah, because we're gonna need those.
Whoa, and then like the apples or whatever that you take.
That's the Torah.
That's the Torah.
Right? The foliage. I don't know what exactly the foliage is. Let's just go with leaves, okay?
Probably the foliage protects the apples. No.
Fine.
No?
Okay.
Fine, right? The foliage, the leaves, right? That's the Torah. 53 parshas right over there. That's called the foliage. It has a source, which is Chokhmah Shel Maila. It's the Chokhmah of Atzilus, let's call it, right? The Chokhmah of Hashem is the source of what winds up dressing itself up in a book. Okay? And then there's, of course, the source of that, which is Keter. And the only way for the Torah to get dressed up in a book and come down and give itself as a finite form is because it goes up beyond Chokhmah into Keter. And this is like going into the roots in order to feed and make new leaves. Okay? So what we're saying now is that still the trunk still looks superficially like the source of the leaves, even though it's not really, because the roots are. And that's what he's saying with this line. That's why I'm focusing on it so much. I'm trying to
because
when you see leaves come out, you see them coming from the trunk.
Because we're accustomed to thinking that
The branches is the trunk. Yeah.
Okay. We're accustomed to thinking that like Chokhmah is the actual source of it all, but it's actually more like a
Keser's
bridge. It's like a bridge. It's a bridge. Like
Yes.
the trunk is a bridge.
Yes. Remember I was saying like the hourglass? Like there's something on top, there's something on the bottom, and there's like a little tiny funnel which everything comes through. That's Chokhmah. It's a point which somehow is able to pass infinity through it, so it holds infinity,
Right.
but it really is sort of passing it through to be expressed. It's a good analogy, the hourglass, no?
It's a good one, yeah.
It's kind of like right there, especially when you think about the meaning of the hourglass. It's like sort of like infinite time, you know. It's like all of that is contained in that one little point. Anyway, so let's try. I want you.
Malchus?
Huh?
Is the foliage Malchus?
Binah.
Yeah, Malchus and Binah right now we are exchanging them one for the other. It's like the idea of below Chokhmah, right? There's Keser, Chokhmah, and then the thing below it, right? Which goes from Malchus to Binah. That's fine. Binah to Malchus. So in other words,
Bring it down to physicality.
the point is you're bringing it down. What level you're bringing it down seems to have different names over here, whether it's Binah or Malchus. But that doesn't matter. They're the same in this case. They both represent sort of like the feminine, the hay, the receiver. So again,
Foliage will be binah and the fruits will be malchus.
From the
not
branches
fruits. No one mentioned anything about fruits.
No, but
Foliage and fruits are the same thing.
Alright.
Are you serious? Come on, the trunk is Chokhmah. Oh, I see what you're saying. Malchus, you said?
I said
Oh, okay,
malchus,
that
the
works.
roots,
Sorry, I apologize. That was
And-
cool. That was
yeah.
cool. No, that's a good.
And the leaves are binah.
Okay, that's cool. L'chaim.
Chaim.
That works well. All right. So anyway, I just want us to understand this line. Ioraisa michochma nafkes. What does it mean? Torah, which is talking about the Binah level of Torah, the Malchus level of Torah, the lower Torah, michochma, from chochma comes out, which is basically that's why we think the source of Torah is chochma, because of this line, right? Torah actually comes. Who's its tati? Chochma. But what he's saying is, bebechinas giloi. That's only in the revealed way. Just like in a revealed way, the trunk looks like it's responsible for giving out the foliage. Aval makora, but its true source, hu lamaila. It's actually above chokhmah, the roots. Shetariag mitzvahs deoraisa v'zayin derabanan. Because if you count up the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah and you add the 7 of the Rabbanan, hem tarach. It comes out to the gematria of
613 mitzvahs?
That's my guess.
248?
Tariag is
613.
Levi
Tareg is 613.
613 plus the 7 mitzvahs of the Rabbanan
620.
620. Why is it Keser? Why is it Keser 620?
That's the gematria, right?
Nice. Gematria is Keser. How do you like that? So basically, when you take the sort of commandments of the Torah, right? It's interesting because what we said before is like the Chokhmah of Hashem. The Chokhmah of Hashem is one thing, but the commandments of Hashem, the actual mitzvahs, which is the 613 and the 7 of the Rabbanan, which we said before, remember, is the will of God is higher than the mind of God. So this is going back to that concept. That, remember we talked about in Parshas Noach, that you can only really access the will when you do, as opposed to when you think. Anyway, if you go up to a 620, which is the mitzvahs combined number, it's called Gematria Keser. And so even though Torah comes out from Chokhmah, it just passes. When it says comes out, it doesn't mean it's born there. It means it just passes through there. Really, it comes from the 620 mitzvahs, which are above Chokhmah inside of Keser. And in a more sort of Kabbalistic tilt to it, it says that these 620 things, what are they? They're amudei or. They're called pillars of light. Why are they called pillars? Because a pillar is something which connects the ceiling to the floor. It goes to the very top and connects to the very bottom. So therefore, this level of Keser, which expresses itself specifically in the mushal, in the physical part, it's called a pillar. And how many pillars are there? 620. So you can sort of imagine like these, what's a mitzvah? It's like you sort of walk into a pillar of light suddenly when you produce a mitzvah, which suddenly connects you to the very ceiling of the thing. Right? That's what the 620 pillars are, of mitzvahs are. They're really pillars of light. So that goes to the top.
What are the 7?
What are the 7 mitzvahs d'Rabbanan?
Yeah.
We can go through them. I need a little help. Eruv,
Oh.
Natilas Yadayim,
Okay.
Hadlachas Neros, Megillah, Hanukkah.
Purim?
Yeah, I said Megillah.
Tahara?
No. V'chule, etc.,
Brachos.
etc. What's that?
Brachos, first thing Torah, not Lechem.
I think I said brachas. No.
No.
Okay, brachas.
What else?
I'll think of it in a few minutes. Anyway, there's 7 mitzvahs specifically. We say Asher Kedishanu Mitzvosav, that He has sanctified us with His commandments and
Halal or Remember?
yeah, Halil. There you go, Halil. Shkoyach. So He has sanctified us with these commandments, and so He sanctified and commanded us, right? So we say that even though these were mitzvahs that came out from the Rabbanan, not from the Torah. So there's only 7 things that we say that for, that He commanded us to do this thing, we make a bracha on it and everything. So they're really, it's like part of the body of the mitzvahs. Again, it's very specific to say that it's not an addition, because it says in the Torah there's 613, you could not add and you could not subtract. So we're not adding to the 613 in a sense. We're saying that these are extensions, like essential sort of offsprings of the mitzvahs that we already have, but they're so pronounced as unique that they actually come into the count and added up to 620. Yeah. V'hu ma'archin lavnunis de galgalta. It's Kabbalah language. And it says these are the white pathways of the skull. What are the white pathways of the skull? First of all, let's just talk about why we're talking about the skull all of a sudden, right? Because the skull, why are we talking about the skull? Does anyone can guess that?
The Keter of the brain?
Yes, very good. The skull is like the Keter of the brain. The brain is clearly Chochmah, right? Chochmah, binah, and das. We have 3 lobes of the brain. Chochmah, binah, and das. And then you have the outer covering, which is called the Keter. So therefore, the whole, in Kabbalistic language, the Keter is called the skull. And when he's saying there's these white pathways through the skull, I guess even physically we have some kind of pathways in our skull, and those represent, there's 620 of them. They represent basically the etchings of, in a certain sense, the Keter is completely beyond. It's completely beyond Chochmah, like actually, as the skull is. It's not even relevant to say that you can understand it, and yet it's above the skull. So it represents sort of like an infinite, unknowing level of godliness. But in that infinite, unknowing level of godliness, there's some kind of a sketch made out in the actual skull matter. Like the skull is made up in pieces, right? It's pieced together, so it has parts. It's not like the parts of the brain, which has 3 parts, and it mamish creates all kinds of divisions in your mind and so forth. The skull is sort of beyond division. Nonetheless, there's a sort of place for division in it, and those are called the pathways of the skull. You understand? And this is you understand what I'm saying? So it's what we're going to say that is, he says that's called Keter. Shu malchus de ein sof. It's called Keter. From, if you're looking at it from below to above, it's above Chochmah, it's called Keter. But from above to below, from like the essence, what is that called? It's called Malchus of Ein Sof. In other words, that itself is a very, very interesting thing to say, right? Because as you know, Ein Sof doesn't have parts. So how can you say there's a Malchus of Ein Sof? So I saw in the Rebbe Rashab said, just because we say there's something called Malchus de Ein Sof, don't think that means that there's also therefore a Chesed Gevur and Tiferes of Ein Sof. No, there's a specific thing called Malchus of Ein Sof, which is basically the external aspect of the Creator. Much like what we said yesterday, that there's the idea of like Rabbi Bolton's vort, that there's the highest part of the creation and there's the lowest part of the Creator. So if it's the Creator, who's talking about parts? No, like the creation is the parts, right? If it's the Creator, there's just Him. So what do you mean the lowest part of the Creator? That sounds like the Creator is divided into parts. He's not. He's all one. It's just that He has this one part, right? The Malchus of Ein Sof, which is basically tucked in there, which is the ability to create parts within inside of Himself.
It's a tuck.
It's tucked in. It's a tuck. That's why Hasidim don't always tuck in their shirts, because they're untucked. They're trying to bring that level right out of there.
Comes all the way back.
Did you follow any of that? Malchus the Ein Sof is what we're now calling these lines of the skull, which basically, what does it mean? It's like sort of a fusion of two concepts. The skull is beyond division. The brain is where division starts, right? It's the inner light, which gets the brain starts, ciphering life off to all the parts of the body. It's the source of like division, the brain. But the skull is above it, so it represents the Ein Sof. But in the skull, there's already 620 lines of like sort of like skull matter, which are sort of hovering over the brain and are the source of the brain. And those 620 lines wind up sort of filtering themselves through the brain and producing 620 physical mitzvahs in this world. So the source of the mitzvahs are beyond the brain, they're in the skull. But what is this? What is it? They're part of the skull, which is basically unites them with Hashem Himself, because they're part of the Ein Sof. They're Malchus of Ein Sof, but they're still part of the Ein Sof. So therefore, that's what's able to enclose. In other words, the reason why Hashem is able to come into this particular finite form, that when the Chokhmah sort of gets its act together and it comes up with the deepest possible thing it could say, and it comes out as 613 mitzvahs, that's not a mistake. I mean, that's not a coincidence. Because really what it's doing is going up into the Keter, where there's like an implicit division of 613 mitzvahs, 620 mitzvahs inside of the Eibishter Himself. And therefore when the infinite, brilliant wisdom of the Creator expresses itself, it expresses itself in accordance with His will, which is therefore it comes out into 620 parts.
Whoa.
Do you get that?
Yeah, wait. So the reason why we can think that we can divide in parts which we cannot is because maybe like...
Say it again, I didn't hear you.
We cannot really, saying that Malchus of Ein Sof exists is not, it's not really saying that it's parts, because like Chokhmah, Binah, and Das are like different things, different parts, and also the 7 things in the middle are also parts. Chesed, word is not. The Malchus is just like usually like an ability for things, like an ability.
Right. But this is an ability which is, it's like, so to speak, action, but it's not. It's action in like in the source of 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 action, which we know action has happened for sure. But the fact that there will be at any given point an ability for any action to be taken is because of that thing exists. Instead of calling it Malchus, you could also call it Keter. He calls it Keter and then Malchus, which means the will. What is the will? The will is not part of it. It's like you. Will is basically you. Oftentimes people just mistake themselves with their will because it's so you. Like, what are you if you're not what you want?
They call that ego in English, right?
I'm not sure. I can't answer that question. I don't really know enough about the ego.
In this, then? The intelligence, because you put to the brain.
To be perfectly honest with you, I don't know exactly what the ego is, and now's not the space to teach me that. So I don't know if you're right or wrong.
The will is above pleasure, right?
No, pleasure is above will.
Pleasure's above will.
Pleasure is above will.
But let's just say at this moment they're sort of the same thing.
Okay. Because they're inside of Keter.
It says, I'll tell you, now that you brought that up, it says that there's the pathways that go through there's the 600 pathways that go into the skull, like we said, but it really says they all come from one pathway. So that's still a pathway in the skull. It's not pure oneness, but it's much more unified than the 613 pathways, right? So that's the 2 parts of Keter. There's the will and there's the pleasure, but they're both sort of part of Keter. They're both, you can, in a certain sense, you could call them both Malchus de Ein Sof, because Keter is Malchus de Ein Sof.
Right.
So the point is, again, this is like your will, and your will is basically you. You know, you'd have to really sort of figure out a deep level of concentration to even consider the difference between you and your will. There is a difference. But going beyond that is basically the essential you with absolutely no description. It's very hard to even have sort of a name for that, obviously. So therefore, what's the point? When you go up and attach yourself to one of these mitzvahs, you're basically attaching yourself to the will of Hashem, the Keter, which is essentially Him. It's very almost indistinguishable from Him, and therefore the mitzvah leads you. Where is that part of Him available in the world, specifically in the mitzvahs?
When you do His will, you get to His pleasure or something.
Yeah, and inside the will ultimately is this unbelievable divine pleasure of being one with God, basically, right? Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. The inner part of will is automatically pleasure.
Right.
I just can't see the clock. Are we good? No, we have some time.
We got time.
Okay. All right. So there's a lot coming out over here. Is everyone following it basically? Levi, you're sort of in and out.
No, I'm there.
You're there? Okay. So basically, because it has these 620 pillars, which therefore it's able to come so low. In other words, that's the beauty of also being connected to the Or Ein Sof, is that it doesn't have any end to its expression. So specifically, it can go all the way down and it reveal itself in Malchus and in finite Gashmi Zdika things. Chochmah, it's too high to come so low. If you get my drift, it's like, because it's not completely infinite, it's just a massive revelation of God. It doesn't have endless ability to express itself. It can only express itself so much. But if you go to the Or Ein Sof, it can express itself and take that Chochmah and express it even into lower things. And why? Because it's part of the Ein Sof, Malchus de Ein Sof. V'lechein, and therefore, Giloi Chochmah Elyona Hamluveshes B'Parshas Kadosh Al Derech Mashal. So, for example, he says the revelation of the higher wisdom, which is enclosed into the Parsha of Kadosh, by way of analogy. So he's kind of picking random mitzvahs to talk about here. Before he talked about the Esrog, now he's talking about one of the Parshas that we say in the Shema, particularly when you put on Rabbeinu Tam's. But it's basically part of the Tefillin. So he's saying so in other words, before he was saying you pick up an Esrog, now he's saying you pick up Tefillin, basically, right? He's saying that the revelation of Chochmah, which is invested into that parsha of your Tefillin, you follow me? So just like the Esrog, you've now enclosed God's wisdom into a thing. Hu yoser migilui ha-chochmah atzma b'makoma ha'elyon. It's even more of a revelation of God. This is pretty cool. This is what it means. It's great to be in this world. It's even more of a revelation of God than it is the Chochmah of Atzilus itself, of course, right? Because how did you get Chochmah of Atzilus to come into a physical object? You had to go higher than Chochmah of Atzilus. So when you're sitting there in a physical world doing a mitzvah, you're in possession of a level of godliness which exceeds the Chochmah of Atzilus, by definition. Because if you're able to get godliness down here, it must have come from a very, very high place that is way beyond Chochmah of Atzilus. So the preciousness of what's before us is kind of ridiculous. I mean, you can only imagine what it's like in Chochmah Batzilus. It's a pretty divine spot. I mean, it's way better than Bria and even Yetzirah. You know what I'm saying? What are we talking about here? We're talking about, in other words, imagine being the angel Michael for a second. What does it mean to be the angel Michael? You're like a servant of God from the 6 days of creation with love and fear, every second, never stopping. I mean, the revelation that is perceived by him, it's like standing in front of the king and looking into his eyes every second. And none of that is anything compared to what you can grab onto a level of godliness when you do a mitzvah in this world. It's crazy. Crazy.
And specifically a physical mitzvah.
Yeah, it has to be. All mitzvahs are physical for that reason.
Right.
Because it's drawn from the Keter, not from Chochmah. It's above Chochmah. Therefore, therefore, you create a certain unbelief. This is another. It's just throwing out the fastballs right now. Amazing stuff here. Therefore, you create a yichud elyon through physical things specifically. What does it mean, a yichud elyon? Ultimately, what does Hashem want? He just wants everything to be clear, which is that everything is Him. Nothing but Him. That's the only thing He wants. Just, can you guys put that together, please? Like, that's the goal. Adir b'tachtonim. So how does He do it? Specifically when the lowest of all levels will recognize that it's all Him. So the yichud that takes place, the unification of the entire existence of the worlds, becomes clear and crystal clear and clarified when the lowest of them participates in that unity. So in other words, you've connected to the ultimate purpose of the entire creation of the Seder Ishtalshlus, and only you can do it. Because if you make a yichud for something like sort of in the middle of the Ishtalshlus, it's not such a gewaldige yichud, because there's still parts that are not united with God. But when you unite the very bottom with God, you did it. Basically, you made the entire existence become united, the yichud. And basically the revelation of Hashem's oneness comes out in its full. There's no greater thing you can do in the entire world. Amazing, no?
This is funny because it's like all these worlds, all these beings, all this divineness, and then you have us, and they need us to like
yeah,
finish
Mamish,
the
they
job.
need us.
We're like sitting with the key. We're like,
Right, in the dark, like trying to like
Yeah,
find
like-
by the.
Just like
the other day.
put the key in.
That's what everybody says. Yeah, it's amazing. Huh?
It's funny.
We're like midgets standing on the shoulders of giants, or I don't guess they say little
ants.
people now, but on the shoulders of giants. And can you call us giant or big people? We're like little people on top of big people, and that's what it is. Like we're finishing off their job. Okay, so he says, "Kamo." Okay, so we make this tremendous yichud elyon through physical things. Kamo al yedei tzedakah. For example, giving tzedakah. Nasa yichud elyon b'atzilus l'mayil megan eden tainug neshamas. You create in other words, what he's saying here is that there's an aliyah that takes place, a gavaldika, like higher influx of life that takes place for atzilus people when we do these mitzvahs. Because when we unify the creation, the unity of the Creator comes out everywhere suddenly. So they're like, what just happened to us? We just saw like the ultimate truth, and it's because a yid gave a nickel to tzedakah. Because they bring out the full unity of the Creator. The Keter becomes revealed. They don't see the Keter usually. They only see the Keter when the Keter pops up in binah, and therefore the sand goes through the hourglass, and suddenly the little center piece of the hourglass like gets to taste the sand. It's only when it goes down that the hourglass can have like a handle on what's going on above.
And that's why they're all watching us.
That's why they're all watching us.
Focus on what we're doing.
The whole purpose, everything is about us. They're waiting for us.
Come on, guys.
I know, right? What do you do?
Come on, what are you doing?
He created like an army, basically. The Alter Rebbe. He's like, you will serve, and you will serve with every single ounce of strength that you have. Woo! Okay, so. So this is the Inyan of when you give tzedakah, you make a yichud elyon ba'atzilus. Right? In Atzilus even. L'mayil megan eden. Tainug neshamas. Even above Gan Eden, which is the pleasure that the souls have. Shu bebriya, which is only in Bria. So not only, you don't just give, in other words, what is he saying? The Tainug of Gan Eden, which is the souls in Bria. Can you imagine what that divinity is like? Not just lower Tachton, the Gan Eden Tachton, even the higher Gan Eden, Ha'elyon. This is like the ultimate pleasure. And he's saying, you make a yichud, which is even above theirs. Okay. Even higher than the tiny of the neshama shehu bebriya. Umalchus da atzilus naisa atik de bria. And what he's saying is, and so there's like a sort of a drasha, as it were, which relates this. What happens when you give tzedakah? So he sort of describes it al-pi Kabbalistic language. He says that Malchus of Atzilus becomes atik of bria. The lower part of Atzilus, the lowest, which is the delivery boy to Bria, it becomes Atik of Bria, right? When Malchus of Atzilus can play two roles. It can either receive all the energy from Atzilus and express it, which is Atzilus itself needs its own like sort of mouthpiece, not necessarily to teach someone else, but to express itself to itself. Like the Malchus of any world is the revelation of that world. So until the world comes to Malchus, the world is just a theoretical thing. Malchus brings that world into like its being. So Malchus of Atzilus has a job to play all by itself when it's not busy giving over to somebody else. You follow me? It's just the job of it is to bring in from a state of non-being to being the world of Atzilus. But when it starts to give over, when it becomes a mashpia, when it has influence on another yid, then it turns into suddenly Malchus of Atzilus becomes Atik of Bria. Because Malchus can play this role of basically becoming the Atik of the world below it. What does it mean suddenly it becomes the Atik of the world below it? So we mentioned in a different class that there's something called the Hishtalshlus of the Ksarim. There's the way that light comes through the Seder Hishtalshlus, where every time it goes to another sphere, it sort of loses something and gets contracted. Or there's the Hishtalshlus of one Keter to another Keter. And it just goes it brings the original light of Keter, and it brings that exact light unchanged to a lower place, which is called Keter, to a lower, in other words, Keter of Atzilus goes straight to Keter of Bria, which goes straight to Keter of Yetzira, and there's no missing any. There's no distractions or cover-ups in the middle. This is like a unique thing that Keter can just sort of punch itself in to the Ishtalshus at different levels. So what does that mean? Malchus of Atzilus, which in general his job is just to reveal the level of godliness called Atzilus and bring that from potential to actual, when it gives over and it becomes Atik, i.e. Keser to Bria, it suddenly gets a Ishtalshus from the Keser of Atzilus. It has now been empowered. In order to give over, it's been empowered with an infinite light of Keser, because you can't give over just as you are in Atzilus. Atzilus is trapped in Atzilus. If it wants to give over, we said it has to go up and grab from Atik and bring it down. So when it decides to do that, suddenly Malchus of Atzilus becomes Atik of Bria. It gets the infinite, and what does that mean? It means that Atzilus has an experience of Atik all of a sudden, which it would never have done, never have had, unless it decided to give something over. Atik on its own won't just like make a visit into Atzilus. It's going to stay there. There's like two ships in the night. But if Atzilus wants to decide to give over something to Bria, it can't. Well, that's a commendable act, and I really think you should do that. But you can't do that without me. So suddenly, Atik decides, okay, I'll participate. And if you want to give over to Bria, I'll participate. So suddenly, Atzilus gets a taste of Bria, which it never would have had unless it gave over what it had to someone else. And that's why, by the way, all this stuff is not just theoretical. This is why the Rebbe, by the time it gets to our generation, created an entire generation of outreach. It's not only because Jews need help. It's because Jews need help. We need help. And the way to grow is to give over. When you try to help another person, when you try and bring your ideas down or out to someone else, you get a feeling, you get atik. There's no other way to do it. So this is really... Yeah.
Transformation happens automatically. Is that what you're saying?
The expression of Atik in the world of Atzilus happens automatically when Malchus of Atzilus turns into Atik of Atzilus. Of Bria. Malchus of Atzilus turns into Atik of Bria. Got that? I think Levi's had enough. I don't know. I'm just talking here. Does everyone understand what's happening?
The whole point is to. The last part about it. You said that when you said that the whole point of.
By the way, if I had a board, this whole thing would be a different experience. You can get those if you don't mind, or send the shliachs and get those markers. What's that, Shaul?
When you said that, you said the rabbis were idea of making outreach is because what?
Because you want to go down, so that you can get the goodies from up.
But if we said that first it goes up to get that and then it goes down.
We didn't really say that. We said it goes simultaneously. If you go down, right. The energy of that down is from the up. It just appears in the lower place. Right. So basically, in short, if you will try to take these ideas, for example, this mimer, right, and give it over to someone else, then you will get something new out of it. You'll get a new revelation out of it from the transference of the idea to another place. That's what we're saying. And that's basically what Atzilus gets, as it were. When Atzilus, when the energy comes through Atzilus and down into this world, and we sort of explains itself as a mitzvah, let's say, and then Atzilus itself gets this huge rush of a high of having experienced what's above it. And what we're calling that is a yichud, basically. Because we unite the creation, we show there's no place left out of God, so this ultimate oneness of the Creator sort of appears, and therefore Atzilus gets a taste of it as well. And on the contrary, it gets a big taste. It was responsible for doing it, to a certain degree.
If there's no kavana there, is it the same, the other...
It's not the same, but something still happens. Because there is a kavana there. It's not like you just happen to accidentally put on tefillin today. Right? Even if you're not mamash sitting there with the greatest of kavanas, your whole kavanah is to serve Hashem. I mean, you could think about it more, but there's no... Basically, there's a... Mitzvahs ain't tzrichen kavana. There is such a concept.
Really?
There's a concept. In some mitzvahs yes, some mitzvahs no, but in general, the whole thing is a machlokes. And what is the machlokes based on is this, is that ultimately if you do a mitzvah, you're making this yichud. You know? Okay, you have to have a basic kavanah that you're doing this to serve Hashem.
Yeah, but then since we really don't get it completely, and which kavanah we really have, are you going to limit the mitzvah by your kavanah or something yet? You won't.
Well, yes, because
there is such an idea.
Not limit the full mitzvah. It's very simple. Mitzvahs are thought, speech, and action. So if you're doing the mitzvah in action, and maybe even in little speech, make the bracha, but you're not thinking about it, it's not like you don't have the action and the speech of the mitzvah. You just don't have the thought of the mitzvah, which arguably is the most important part. That's why we're all about sort of meditating. But still, you don't. It's the most important part of the mitzvah. Just thinking about doing a mitzvah and not doing it is not right. The deed is the main thing, but within the deed, there's a part of the deed which is called thought.
Right.
So that's the most important part of the deed. It's like the choice part of the deed.
Right.
Kol tuv sela.